started, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Do we want to close the doors? Okay, thanks. Obviously, the energy sector, as you all know, is a prime and a prize target for anyone with nefarious motives. The threat actors are wide, and the list of them is long, from rogue insiders to criminal hackers to nation state threats. And I wanted to sort of address, obviously, the changes that we've had in going from, criminal and insider threats to now what we're facing in terms of national security threats from sophisticated nation-state actors. So we're looking at, obviously, the risks today have grown. We're looking at ransomware. We're looking at data theft. And obviously, with the war in Ukraine, we're even looking at potential for digital warfare. So I wanted to talk about sort of where the industry is going from here. For a long time, industry, asset owners, and suppliers sort of ignored a lot of the signals about the growing security threats. Because attacks weren't happening, people weren't seeing them, it was easy to focus attention more on other things, focus attention and budgets on other things. But that's changed in the last decade, and the industry has really come together in terms of partnerships, both within the industry and with government. And so we're going to talk a bit today about some of those efforts, the success of them, the challenges that still exist, and what still needs to be done. So obviously we've got some great panelists today. You guys know them. We've got Tom Fanning, who is Chairman, President, and CEO of Southern Company. And also we have Bill Fehrman, who is President and CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Energy. So I wanted to start with you guys talking about the culture, the security culture within your own companies. What does that look like today? How has it changed? And how have you created a culture that's friendly to security?
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. At least for us, and I think your timeline is about spot on, about a decade ago, that things began to change as we engaged more with government across our companies. And we used to have a very strong focus on just safety, i.e. employee safety. And fast forward to today, the tagline, at least across our company, is safe and secure. And that we now put as much emphasis on security of our people, our assets, our customers, our data, as we do the safety of our customers and our employees. And there's been a number of changes across our organization with regards to what we do to enhance culture, to keep security front of mind. Phishing tests are rampant across our company. We do a lot of them, and there is a lot of follow-up in the event that you have issues on phishing. Like Tom, we're deeply engaged with our government partners more today in bringing that back to our employees and our company and be very transparent about what's happening across the partnerships and the collaboration and what other companies are doing, what we need to do. And then I would say, as an employee across our company, one of the most significant changes over time has been the reduction of efficiency across our IT networks, because there is now so much more security. There's so much more use of passwords and multiple passwords. And if you talk to our employees, and particularly our network engineers and our IT people, that we just have imposed so much more security that it's a lot more difficult to move around through the networks and get onto the networks. But that's just a price that we pay to make sure that we do have enhanced security. Tom, at your place?
Yeah, see, I think I'm the only CEO in this industry that's ever been a CIO. Now, most days when I was CIO, I thought that stood for career is over. It's an extraordinarily hard job, and it was a lot of fun, though. And so back then, we got into this idea of attacking ourselves. You know, the old creative destruction, looking for gaps, fill the gaps, and move on. And so I would argue that this kind of high-level knowledge of the importance of a security culture goes back way more than 10 years. Now, I will say that, as Bill points out, and as you pointed out, I think kind of the broad public consciousness really has evolved over the last 10 years. Bill now essentially leads the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council. I guess I did for some years before that. And in my early days there, it became very clear to me that just kind of living within the electricity silo and making sure that we were accountable to ourselves was important but not sufficient. And we knew that we had these inextricable links in the private sector across maybe to telecom, maybe to finance, maybe to a variety of other areas. And then we had these interdependencies between us and the federal government. And to make a long story short, we started to formalize the idea that this culture of security couldn't just be within an entity. It had to be, in the broadest sense, a shared responsibility with a variety of people. One of the important things, and Bill, help me remember this, but I want to say it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, somewhere around there. So I chair the INPO board, Institute of Nuclear Power Operators. It's a self-governing board to make sure that all the nukes behave a certain way. We do very tough self-assessments, all that. The idea was to take that kind of mindset about the importance of cyber hygiene and start to hold ourselves accountable as an industry. And so we developed, I think, a template, right, a scorecard, and now we have teams that go out and evaluate each of the companies in our industry. Part of that, so there's, I always say it in the world of kind of whatever it is we do, making, moving, and selling electricity, there are whats and there are hows. And what I say about the hows is it's our behaviors, it's how we treat each other, our customers, our external publics. The hows are as important and more powerful generally than the whats. The idea of having internal cyber culture that now is front of mind and at a tactical, not strategic level. I mean, in other words, everybody is aware that they have dual-factor authentication and a variety of other responsibilities. You just don't plug the little thingamajiggy into your machine. There's a whole new framework that we must follow in order to be safe. I think that has started really well in our industry, and we are now moving that consciousness not only across the private sector, but also with government, intelligence community, our sector-specific agencies, and even folks like DOE, FBI, Secret Service, U.S. Cyber Command, to really understand how that shared obligation manifests itself.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me some examples of the changes, some material changes that have come about from this kind of collaboration and cooperation towards securing the grid as a whole?
Towards what now?
Towards securing the grid as a whole, so for bolstering the security. You're talking about individually in your company, and then you're saying you realized that it wasn't just individually that you needed to be addressing these things, but as an industry as a whole. What has the industry done, really detailed sort of material changes that have been made to bolster the security of the grid as an industry?
Well, the first point is you take a dual evaluation of both the physical and cyber security. We know that if the bad guys come after us, and let's not deal so much in the world of social security numbers, but rather the awful existential threat that continually faces us. We get attacked on the average 3 million times a day.
Attacked or probed?
Well, it's the same thing. If somebody's sitting outside your house with a gun, they're not outside, they're, say, in the street or something, and they're looking for ways to get in. I would argue that's an attack. Now, I am using the broad sense. But 3 million times a day is a big deal, because if they're successful, maybe they found a way in, maybe they've learned something that I don't want them to learn. Mm-hmm. So we handle that a variety of different ways. Tom Wilson, where are you, Tom? Raise your hand somewhere. You're over here somewhere. He's over there. There's our CISO. And so what we've done is we've done a variety of technical things. For example, we have one connection to the outside world that we manage very carefully. We do all the white lists and black lists and all that stuff. I always liken that to, did you ever see the movie A River Runs Through It?
Yeah.
So there's Robert not Robert Redford.
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt, sitting there fishing in the trout stream. Imagine that all the bytes of data coming across the servers in the world to Southern Company and back are molecules of water. And we're trying to find fish. In other words, we're trying to find the bad guys. We know this part of the river, there's no bad guys. It's the white list, and so we're okay, and we can fish in there all we want to. This part of the river we know is really bad stuff, and we know the bad guys, and so we know to avoid that, and we know what to do with those guys. I think the real challenge is this great middle, the gray area. And what we're really looking for, and we have active ways to do this, is to assess the perturbations in data flows, something that's unusual. And that's what you do when you fish for trout, right? You have a little waterfall into a pool, and you see a swirl in the pool, and you go get them. Even now, we're advancing that idea to not just go after fish, but fish DNA. Did a system behave in a way that we didn't expect it to, which may indicate that somebody was there? And what do we do about that? The other thing now, and this is a big theme, I'll quit talking here in a minute, but we collaborate with the FBI and a variety of other people so that now, in the federal government sense, in the intelligence community, with other companies, we do this internally in the electricity sector. When we see something unusual, we react to smells. We see something and we go, hey, have you guys seen that? Maybe inside Southern it doesn't matter, but if you put Berkshire together with Southern, and maybe JP Morgan, and maybe AT&T, all of a sudden it becomes meaningful. And we have seen that when allegedly the Russians tried to get into our nuclear systems in America. That was done with a collaboration of the private sector and the federal government, and we started seeing a pattern that was unusual. So when you say, what are you doing? There's physical things you can do. I can limit the pipes, and I can do dual factor authentication, and I can do all sorts of, but I think the bigger issue here is how we're going to work together. And it is an obligation, not an option. This is not sharing, it is collaboration in how to protect America and ourselves.
And it seems also like having a perspective where security is foremost in your mind. When you see anomalous behavior, you don't dismiss it.
Value is a function of risk and return. I come from a finance background. And I think what we're seeing right now is everybody gets return. Oh, if I can improve the growth rate of my earnings per share, that's wonderful. But the risk about my business environment is awesomely important. If I can just keep my earnings constant and reduce risk, value should go up. And I would argue this was some of the important stuff we did in the Solarium Commission. Making sure that the board and the CEO and the CFO have to sign off to your control environment. Part of that will be your level of cyber hygiene, appropriate to the level of business risk you have, is something that is a shared obligation now of the board and the CEO. So you better have a whole set of controls in place in order to get a clean accounting opinion. Big deal.
Bill, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope. I have nothing further to add.
You did mention physical security as being as important as cybersecurity. We had that incident in 2013 with Metcalf Station, where fiber cables were cut and then the substation was shot at. We still don't know who was behind it or what the motive was. What has the industry done to address the physical security of substations and critical infrastructure?
All you have to do is drive around and look at substations today versus what they look like 10 years ago. And the amount of defense and the amount of protection that we've put on our substations is significant. bulletproofing materials around the outside, motion detectors, cameras, concertina wire, multiple access ways you have to use to get in. It's an incredible change from where we were, but a necessary change.
We've also put in place as part of the ESCC, what we call it, the STEP.
A step transformer.
The Spare Transformer program, and then there's the other one. Somebody remember. Spare Connect. Thank you. It's the first, second, third derivatives around all the major equipment that will keep us safe. We've been working, I talked with David Turk, a brilliant guy. He's the Deputy Secretary of DOE right now. And he and I were chatting about other ways to become more resilient, given the kind of fatter tails we're seeing in weather as a result of climate change and a variety of other things. Is there a way for the federal government to play a role? So the federal government has a strategic petroleum reserve. Should we have a strategic reserve of transformers that should be located all over the place? And what about this first, second, third derivative stuff? Right now, supply chain is such a big deal. We're worrying very much right now as an industry. The other thing this industry does is mutual assistance. You will find in a whole lot of other people that you've covered, I would call out telecom, but a whole lot of others, view cyber hygiene and security as a competitive advantage. Part of our DNA in electricity is mutual assistance. We help each other. One of the other things we do is when there's a big hurricane we call a national response event. Yep. And we will organize everybody, all these thousands of trucks that come into an area to get the power back on and restore hope to these communities. The other thing we do now, and I think we're the first industry, is mutual assistance on cyber issues. So, inextricably, physical and cyber are part of the big issue. We also have war gamed it with the federal government. And if there was an existential threat that was operationalized, in other words, Russia or somebody wanted to take us out, we think it would be both physical and cyber.
Actually, I wanted to talk with you about that mutual assistance, but I'll come back to that later. Information sharing, of course, has been a big issue, and it's been one of the biggest movements or efforts that have been made. And it seems like the simplest thing to do is to share information, but it's been fraught with challenges. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about some of the challenges that have occurred around information sharing. What kind of information, in detail, what kind of information is getting shared these days that wasn't being shared before? And what still needs to happen in information sharing that's not happening?
Why don't we take that one?
Yeah.
So the evolution of information sharing has been dramatic over the past, I would say even 24 months. Mm-hmm. And it's now well beyond information sharing. It's actual transmitting of information both ways between us and government and getting actionable insights back. That was a core feature of the cyberspace solarium, was to get the information into government, get it assessed, and get the information back so that companies can actually go do something with it.
Is it a two-way street now?
It is a two-way street.
Because it used to be a single.
It is a two-way street. We're at 20 miles an hour. We want to be at 100 miles an hour, but we're moving in the right direction. And with the JCDC that Jen Easterly is putting in place, and the fact that we're going to have assets together so that when this information comes in, it can be assessed by government, by those of us on the front line, and we can get that pushed back out again very quickly, is light years ahead of where we were just a couple of years ago. And again, I credit Tom and his work on cyberspace solarium and the ESCC, because the collaboration and the coordination of government and industry now is exponentially more than it was, again, just a couple of years ago. And when we did the 100-day sprint for the electricity sector that Ann Neuberger pushed, we were able to get across the investor-owned utilities about 90% of the customer base into a program where we either had sensors in place that we were able to share, or companies committed to go put sensors in place. Again, you wouldn't have seen that just a few years ago. And so I think from a foundational perspective, coming out of cyberspace solarium, coming out of the ESCC, the JCDC and the commitment by government agencies to all come together will give us the process, the hub and spoke, if you will, to get information put in and get actionable insights back out.
What is the mechanism for sharing right now? Is it simply a classified network, or how are you?
Let me take you the aspiration. So wait. We do share. So we have CRISP. That's another one where we measure. That was my vision of the river. You know, that's, what is it? 80% of our customers moving through servers. We analyze all that data. That's my river runs through it story. And you're exactly right on the other. Here's though, you hit a hot button of mine, and I'll try and restrain myself.
Don't.
No way.
Sharing is exactly the wrong concept for critical infrastructure. Now, let me parse that one. For truly critical infrastructure, so the unfortunate acronym, I love the acronyms we do, right? The unfortunate acronym in the Solarium Commission report was SICI, Systemically Important Critical Infrastructure. What is it? Jen wants to use SIE. She keeps punching me every time I use SICI now. SICI means that we have done an evaluation, and what you do inside Homeland Security at the National Risk Management Center. They have 55 national critical functions. We analyze each of the critical functions. We just did a war game. There's Michelle Guido. I keep looking at her. She knows everything. She does all the work, for heaven's sakes. But we do all these war games on what happens if you can't generate electricity. Or what are the inputs? What are the first, second, third derivatives to generating electricity? It is an electricity problem. Oh, it's a natural gas problem. Oh, well, we got to get natural gas on the board. Oh, and what happens if you can't trust communication? So we got to get telecom on board. And there's a whole lot of derivatives that go into this analysis. For things that are truly SICI, systemically important, you can't rely on sharing. You're already too late. You don't even know what you're looking at in order to share. The aspiration for America is to have, and you said it, I'm just going to explode the idea a little bit. When you said 10 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour, go faster, we actually need real-time analysis of the battlefield. The most important thing you can do in warfare, starting, is to understand what the battlefield looks like. Who is on it? What are they doing? And you need to have it in a complete fashion so that in one place, and this is the JCDC that we're standing up inside CISA, you'll have the three-letter intelligence agencies. You'll have our sector-specific agencies, the private sector in the broadest sense, anybody at the first, second, third derivatives that contribute to critical infrastructure, and those guys that will hold the bad guys accountable. You want them seeing the same thing you see at the same time. Now, very often it's this, okay, if you can imagine, I said Southern Company 3 million times a day. So some of this is spurious, and some of it is a kid, and some of it is somebody just driving by and looking. Some of it is deadly serious. What we have to do is get a data management capability, which we already have in the U.S., believe it or not. The intelligence community is fantastic. But we have, as you said, share inputs in. They have a piece of the battlefield. And together we get a sense as to what's really going on. Now, that is an enormous data issue. That's what we're trying to build at the JCDC. You can't do that for everybody. It'd be like boiling the ocean. That's why you only start with those things that are, in my language again, SICI, truly critical. What are the most important electricity infrastructures in America? I would argue the transmission paths into New York City are. Ocilla, Georgia, they're not. And so you have to have in the United States some sense of triage and start there, all right? Then we'll move back and we'll try and protect as much as we can in the best way possible, right? But the whole idea of sharing, to me, is something that we've got to get rid of for those most important assets that will offset the ability for the bad guys to execute an existential threat.
So speed of information analysis, knowing everything before it happens,
as it
analysis
is
in real
happening.
time, as it is happening.
And the other one, there's another nuance of sharing that's important, but it's when I started going to the business roundtable with some of these ideas, I think they all thought I had 3 6s on my forehead, you know? I mean, I was like, because in general, when you say sharing, generally you've had a breach or something bad has happened, or a lot of companies don't want to share that. Their stock price will go down or something. Or they lose control of the data flow, and all of a sudden their stuff is published on the Fox News, for heaven's sakes. I don't know. There is another important aspect of sharing that deals with shareholder interest. The SEC now has an interest in making sure that shareholders are protected for things that our current or prospective investors should know as they evaluate your stock. So there's another level of sharing that should be in the public view, not in real-time classified view, sure, that is really important to America. That's an area we're still moving.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to sort of address Colonial Pipeline, because we talk about, you know, a lot of the changes that the industry has made, a lot of the movements towards secure infrastructure and secure culture and things like that. But when Colonial Pipeline got hit with ransomware, they got caught flat-footed. They didn't have a plan for how to respond to the ransomware attack. And because the business network and the operational network were connected, they had to take down the operations. And in part because they were concerned that the ransomware would spread, but also because their automated billing system no longer worked. They couldn't determine how much product was going to customers and how to invoice. So what is the energy sector doing to address the ransomware threat and preparing for that and really modeling for those consequences that you're not necessarily anticipating?
So I don't consider ransomware any different than Russians or Iran or North Korea. It's just another attack on my system. And if I'm doing the right things to protect myself from those folks, I'm doing the exact same thing to protect myself against ransomware. And I think that from a perspective of our systems and our preparation and how we drill, you know, we assume we're going to get hit, and that goes to resilience. And as we look at how we set up our networks and how we arrange our systems, it goes a little bit to what I said earlier, is that somebody may get in, but they're not going to get to go very far. And when we look at certain things like ransomware and other attacks, I don't really discriminate across. I think it's too hard to silo the different types of things that could happen versus we're just going to globally protect our networks. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that those folks who are probing or those who really want to get in are going to have a very hard time doing that. But and regardless of whether it's a ransomware attack or a malicious attack.
But if your focus is just on keeping them out, you're not going to keep them out. They're going to get in. So in the case of the Colonial Pipeline, they hadn't anticipated, what do you do when your automated systems are down? What do you do when you can't do your day-to-day operations? Your computers are completely locked. There has to be.
Yeah, cyber hygiene is a little bit like your body, right? There's a lot about your body that keeps bad stuff out, but your body reacts in a certain way when bad stuff gets in, white blood cells, a variety of other things.
Right.
And expanding the idea here too, when we go to the big four bad actors, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, we kind of know what their general motives are. Like mm-hmm. China likes to lie, cheat, and steal, and Russia likes to do geopolitical leverage, and Iran is dogmatic, and North Korea needs to fund their bankrupt country. The emergence of, as Bill pointed out, I use another movie here. I go James Bond movies. It's the emergence of Spectre. And this is a worldwide criminal enterprise. They're not necessarily hung together, but they are sophisticated, well-funded, and they will go after you, generally right now, for economic reasons. They want to make money, okay? But there is a troubling emergence of Spectre that could be dogmatic. What if ISIS was able to procure statecraft on the dark web and use it without fear of retribution. What do they have to lose? One of the things that we have when we set up the Cyberspace Solarium Commission is this idea of let's create rules of the road in cyberspace, you know? So let's create a diplomatic kind of safe zone. And if you step outside these lines, then you're in violation. The second piece, that was the first piece. The second piece was harden our defense. The third piece was to unleash our capability to fight back. So when you think about these guys, they operate outside the sphere of normal diplomacy. And they don't respond particularly well to the powers of state.
There's no deterrence from their perspective.
And so, son of a gun, they're very dangerous. We got to watch out for those guys. But let me give you another example, following on what Bill said. Bill's 100% right. When I think about Southern, so obvious, crown jewels of Southern would probably be our energy management system. We're a wee bit smaller, but similar size to the nation of Australia in terms of energy production and flows across. And so the energy management system, if you somehow got into that, that would be a mess. So we do the physical thing. We have one in an undisclosed location in Alabama. We have another one in a secret location in Georgia. They're underground. We can have a nuclear bomb go off and we'll still be okay, believe it or not, theoretically. The second one is, what though happens if they did? Then we have something we call spare tire. Spare tire is a strategy, just as it does in the highway where you blow your tire out. It's something that will get you from the place of the accident to a safe place, a gas station. So we have a way to kind of keep the system alive. I wouldn't want to run a power market on it. It's another reason why I don't like the so-called organized markets. They are not built for resilience. But at least we at Southern, we have a way to do that. And the third is, what if you can't trust communications? What if you can't ... We have the strategy that we actually promulgated in our industry.
Right.
We call it the MacGyver, all right? And MacGyver says, I'm going to basically, and I'm going to grossly simplify this, but I can't trust the digital world anymore. Remember in Annapolis now, they're training midshipmen to use sextants instead of not relying on GPS. What if we could island off the United States and run it in a physical way, not in a digital way? Okay, we did that in the 50s. Unfortunately, all those people are dead. So what we have to do is rethink almost a back to the future concept of running our system physically during a time of national duress. If we could do that.
Yeah, that was my question because it was the next question that I had in terms of automation, because there is so much reliance on automation. It's like, what happens when you can no longer rely on it, when it fails you? We saw in Ukraine, when they had the 2 attacks there, they had the manual override. They could go back to that. They were able to restore power fairly quickly. But obviously in the US, we are moving rapidly more and more towards automating everything. So what do you see as some kind of resolution to that? I mean, obviously you've given a great example of your management system, and you've thought that through. But in terms of just all of the automation throughout, what is the industry doing around that? Thinking of going back to the 1950s on everything? If you need to, what is the planning?
Well, ultimately, when you're drilling, that's essentially what we do, is you just keep taking the next tool away. And you get to a point where you've challenged your teams to a point where they really have not a lot left. At least our company, the saying is that when we get finally down to where there's only cockroaches and ham radio operators, we know we've gotten to the bottom of what we can do. And again, at our place, we have a catalog of ham radio operators who we can send out and put into substations and ultimately still continue to operate the system, to Tom's point. And you have to just keep challenging your teams by taking away the tools that they're used to having. And you just keep taking one away. And the industry, in collaboration with government and a number of partners, including Canada, does the GridX test. And that is a massive test of our capabilities to respond against both physical and cyber attacks, and have the person running the drill continue to strip away what you have available to you to see if you can actually survive and continue to serve customers.
I mean, it sounds kind of glib, but you're 100% right. When we think about research and development at Southern, we have this great big organization that does research and development. What we're really in the business of is breaking things. We want to take them up to their point of failure. And we go, oh, well, that caused a failure. Now what do we do? How can we fix it? How can we go to the next level? Well, that's exactly what we're doing here in GridX. We go through, I forget how many stages, 4 or 5.
4 or 5, yeah.
And we stress the system out. And we find what broke, and we try to fix it. And you uncover all sorts of interesting stuff. And I tell you, even today I've made the error. So when I've described this notion of sharing and collaboration, I described it with the sense of a federal government and a private sector. I left out, again, the state and local governments, the people that are going to have their boots on the ground trying to deal with a problem as it exists. We've got to integrate them into the solution. And the other one that's interesting, and this was the point I think of the last GridX, was international.
Right.
One of the tests we did was blowing up the transmission system in New York, I think, and we caused a blackout in Toronto. Well, so Toronto's dark, New York City's dark. What do we do? You know, did we tell the federal, I mean, did we tell the Canadians, we'll see you in a few weeks? Or do we somehow work together? Right now, when you think about identifying the battlefield isn't, you know, I love to say that when President Eisenhower created the first Solarium Commission, it was to reimagine military doctrine post-World War II. You had the Soviet Union over here, you had the emergence of NATO over here, and you had a tank battle on the plains of Poland. That was their challenge. What do we do? Here, the tank battle isn't on Poland, it's on our telecom networks, electricity grids, our financial systems, and everything else. The oceans on the left and right don't help us. The friendly neighbors on the north and south don't help us. We're stuck. What do we do? A lot of times those threats come in all sorts of unconventional, asynchronous sorts of ways. You better have a well-defined international cooperative landscape. Right now we use the doctrine that we use in the intelligence community, it's called Five Eyes, the big English-speaking countries. I would argue that's way insufficient to managing some of these problems as they emerge. And if the attack is coming, I'm completely making this up, guys. But if the attack is coming from Russia through some servers in the Netherlands, we got to get to the Netherlands. We got to have cooperation of that nation. So it's a very complex issue that we have to solve, and we're working on it.
How are we with time? I don't have a clock up here.
20 minutes left.
Okay. We will take some questions from the audience, so if you're thinking of anything, I'll move over to that soon. We talked about the mutual assistance earlier, and I wanted to talk about some of the ways that industry is coming together, partners and helping each other. The Cyber Mutual Assistance Program, developed at the direction of the ESCC, allows industry members to ask for assistance in an emergency when they've been attacked, but also in advance. How has that worked out? I mean, what are some of the successes or some of the challenges that you've seen in that? Has it been employed?
Yeah, sure. I can remember when Black Energy hit. I was doing Bill's job then, and within, in fact, this guy's on my board now, but Ernie Moniz was the Secretary of Energy, and he called me up and says, we got a problem. And I'll bet you, is Kuhn in here? He was in here, I saw him. Anyway, within 45 minutes, we got most of the ESCC on a phone.
Yep.
And we said, we have to deal with this. And within probably 3 hours, we had a patch going out. And what the associations are good for then, so the ESCC, how many CEOs you got? 30? Yep. Something like that. And they're co-ops, munis, and the investor-owned utilities. Okay, so we can deal with something there, but the associations really help us. EEI, boom, we can blast it out to all the IOUs, the 100 and so whatever there are there. And was it APPA and NRECA,
NRECA,
they'll do the
yeah.
co-ops immunities. So look, I can give you old examples. I think what you did on the Sprint and then involving gas and others was really important.
So the cyber mutual assistance, I was actually part of the creation of that back in the day, and it's modeled exactly like what Tom talked about earlier as far as hurricane response, linemen. Only here you have IT people and experts in their field. And one of the initial blasts that happens is that while companies may not have network experts that I can send to Southern who know how to do it, what I can do is send folks who can help support recovery of laptops and other equipment such as that and free those people up to go work on the networks who have the expertise. So it's really bringing in a wave of support who can free up resources within the company who know their systems inside and out. And when we were doing the 100-day sprint on the electric side, we brought the cyber teams together to develop and support how would we actually push this out? How are we going to work with small munis, IOUs, DOE to make sure that we're enveloping all of the companies that are out there that do this? And if people ask for support, they got it. And it's really a crazy good tool that we have. Now, fortunately, we haven't had a hurricane of IT issues where we have to get sharing out, but we have the agreements in place where we can instantly send people just like we do with linemen. And so I feel very comfortable that if we had an event where we needed to call upon the pool of IT experts, that companies would very willingly give those up and send them in.
You know what else I would say that we have done and you have continued in a terrific manner is developed a real, no kidding, real partnership with DOE.
Yes.
So I am very critical of dumb regulation, okay? And I worry that knee-jerk reaction, we've fought through this so far with the federal government, but the private sector worries about it too, is, oh, all you're doing is asking for more regulation. And I say, no, absolutely not. I try to get this aspirational thinking and behavior. So what's the difference? Regulation breeds, I think, in the private sector, a defensive mentality. There's a requirement. This is my obligation to meet that requirement, and that defines success. It doesn't answer the question, how good can you be?
Right.
And so therefore, we can't rely, there's a base level of regulation. There's a, everybody should do X, Y, Z. I get that.
Lowest common denominator.
Yeah. But that's not going to carry the day. When you think about okay, so let's add on top of millions of attacks a day now the world of artificial intelligence and perhaps one day quantum computing. Yeah. And now millions is trillions. You've got to skate to where the puck will be. You just can't. And regulation is always backward looking. It never looks forward. So anyway, that's just one more thing I would say, but DOE has been a terrific partner in helping us think through what to do and be real creative.
Very, yep.
You had Jennifer Granholm on the phone the other day. I thought she was terrific.
She was great. And the Energy Threat Analysis Center, another tool that DOE is building. So the ETAC, this will be a DOE-sponsored assessment of the information that's coming in from the sensors, and then that information gets shared with the JCDC. So it's a spoke to the hub, if you will, and it's a frontline collaboration that DOE is pushing forward, and we're very supportive of that. Again, it's another tool in the toolbox for us within our collaboration with government.
You're also on the board of the ARC.
Oh, the ARC, yeah.
That's the Joint Analysis and Resilience Center between us and Finance.
Right.
So that's another spoke into the ARC. I would argue the ISAC is another spoke into the
It is,
arc.
Chris.
So these
coming
are
in.
all inputs and feedback loops that we have with the federal government right now. And then we need to bring in the fusion centers to get the states and local governments involved.
I see. Are there any questions from the audience? I know that there's a roving microphone for...
Right.
Hi, Seth Frater-Thompson with Energy Hub. Just a question about the sort of incentives to get this right. Utilities are still coming up to speed and using software as a service. Sometimes you have regulatory barriers to using that. Sometimes utilities themselves are just not comfortable yet, but many of the best cybersecurity tools out there.
Not comfortable doing what?
Using software as a service. And thinking about how many of the best cybersecurity tools out there are offered on a SaaS basis. Is that a barrier either within your companies or from a regulatory perspective of giving you sort of a disincentive to use it?
I don't think so. Bill made the point earlier on mutual assistance that you have Berkshire Hathaway, you got every tool in the box, Southern Company does. I mean, we get it. There's a whole lot of our brothers and sisters in the industry that are much smaller, and I would go to some of the small munis and co-ops that don't have the kind of depth of offering. Yeah, I would argue, and I'm going to say something harsh, and I don't mean this harsh inside our industry, but if you are engaged in a systemically important activity to our national security, and you have infrastructure involved in that, you better have the depth of resources to be able to manage, okay? In other words, if you don't, if you can't, or if you won't, get out. Our national security is too important.
Yeah, I think on that question, and I'll go back in my own history. I was very anti-cloud back in the day, and I was very anti-software as a service back in the day. But as things have changed, obviously the cloud providers, particularly the big cloud providers, have exceptional security and in many ways more than what I can even do. To me, it's another layer of security. I have that security, then I have my own security on top of that. And so I don't shy away from software as a service. We look at it, we use it, and I would say that as time has gone on, I've gotten more comfortable with it. But I'm old and gray hair, and I like my own stuff first, but I'm getting better at accepting it.
Do we have time for more questions?
We do.
How much time do we have?
10 minutes.
10, okay.
Hi, I'm Jensen Vixoric. I work in IT for PPL Corporation out of Pennsylvania. I was wondering if you could go into how you're educating your employees about what they do in their personal lives and their personal identity on social media, how that can impact their professional identity and in the workplace. So, for example, we have a lot of the phishing tests that we do at our company as well to educate about the bad things that can happen when they're not secure when they work. But one of the latest scams that we're getting externally seems to be, we're figuring that it's coming from people checking out our LinkedIn profiles, and we're getting texts to our personal devices posing as our CEO. So anything that, anything that you're...
Never trust your CEO.
Right, yeah, of course.
Delete those. Do you want to take a shot at that?
Well, there's a catalog of things that we do to try to drive this level of exposure and understanding and commitment to security within our company, and it goes well beyond phishing. I mean, phishing is front and center, but we do a lot of training just around data protection. That is actually a more understood term than cybersecurity. I think if you go talk with most folks within our company, if I said, I need you to really work hard at cybersecurity, or I need you to really work hard at protecting data, they're going to understand protecting data a lot more than cybersecurity. And they'll feel like they have a better chance of doing that than perhaps protecting our network from multiple attacks from countries that are wanting to hurt us. And but there isn't any sort of silver answer here. You know, I mean, it's just a lot. To me, it's a lot of things, and it's really trying to touch employees to be your frontline defense. For instance, in my case, unfortunately, I clicked on a phishing test and got caught. And
so what'd they do?
Well, what I did was I wrote an entire letter to every employee saying what my mindset was, why I clicked on it. I happened to be moving, and it came up and said I need to change my Apple TV account because it was just happened to be a great test from my CISO, who I'll never forgive. But I personalized it, and I sent a note to all employees, and then in my case, I had to send an explanation letter to my boss, Greg Abel, on why I clicked on this test. And I think, again, it's a personalized thing that, at least in our company, as I said, safe and secure. So it's a fundamental behavior that we're looking for, and we take every opportunity that we can to exemplify that in the thinking of our day-to-day employees. Oh, Tom?
We do a continual effort. We actually include discipline in this. So if you're like a real doofus and, okay, you fail it the first time, got it, this is why you failed it, we send the note. Second one, you're a doofus again, failed it again. Third, we inform your manager and we start, we'll remove you from connection to the outside world, so. The other thing, and we actually do that to our board as well, which is kind of fun. The other thing, though, inside Solarium, this was kind of a passion of mine. Do you remember, those of you that are as old as I am, which is darn few now, Don't Be a Litter Bug, Smokey the Bear. What we're trying to do, this is one of the recommendations in the Solarium Commission that has been funded, and now Jen Easterly and I chair her board, her advisory board. We're going off to Austin tonight and tomorrow. One of the committees is working on this idea of cultural intervention in America about cyber hygiene. So what is the next, more than a password? You heard her say that. We're trying to develop a sense of consciousness in America and an accountability for people that offer services about what can we all do to be safer as individuals, not just at our workplace. Right. It's a big deal. Yep.
Do we have time for another question?
Maybe one more?
There's one in the back there.
There's one back there.
Rob Taryn from Energy Impact Partners. Tom, you alluded to the pace of disruption increasing in cybersecurity. And I was wondering if both you and Bill could speak a bit about how your organizations approach innovation in cybersecurity, particularly with resources already being stretched.
So what is our posture with respect to innovation?
Yes, whether you have particular budgets or initiatives to help push the pace of innovation in your cybersecurity.
So really, I'll let Tom Wilson answer that one. But we have a terrific group, distinguished people, and he has all the money he needs to do what he wants to do. He really does. I mean, we spend, just to give you a scale, Tom, you're going to have to answer this, but we spend at Southern Company, our CapEx budget is around $9 billion a year, okay? And we always spend more than that, by the way. We always underestimate our future expenditures. Our cyber budget internally is, as a percent, what?
Out of the $9 billion or out of the ITO? He's thinking about it out of the IT budget.
Okay. So. Give me some dimensioning of your budget.
6%?
I mean, it ain't much, okay? So my view, when I go back, and I
think it's going to get bigger because you just told him he can have anything he wants.
You know what? I think we can always be better. One of my things in life, even as you and I are sitting here, and Ken, you too, we know we could do our jobs better than what we're doing today. There's no way everybody's maxed out or quality-wise as good as you can be. I am always convinced that there's more we can do, either do it better, do it cheaper, do it faster, what have you. And so my view is when I look at the equation of value as a function of risk and return, and this is something I lay awake at night about when I go into these classified spaces. I remember you and I went in and it was like, holy smokes, what are we going to do about that one? There is always room to do more. Now, you want to be reasonable, and I think we're all try to be as reasonable as we can be. But if Wilson came to me, no kidding, and said, Tom, you've done it before. Hey, we ought to do this. And I go, done. And then I remember I asked him, I said, okay, if you had another $10 million, what would you do? What's the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing? So, and if I had to say where we should spend our money, the innovation budget, if you will, is all about the battlefield. I think we're all pretty good at responding to a threat that we know. The sooner we can see the threat, the better off we are. And the deeper we can go in analyzing what the threat may be, the better off we are. And let me just give you some examples of, Tom, I would say, some of our innovation. And then I'd love for you to comment on what I just said. But IronNet. General Keith Alexander, you know, he kind of grew U.S. Cyber Command, ran NSA. He's a distinguished general. And people underneath his kind of sphere of influence through his career have been Chris Inglis and Jen Easterly and Ann Neuberger and a variety of other outstanding American patriots. So he's come forward with IronNet. We think IronNet's really cool and has some really interesting ideas. So Bill mentioned we got OT pretty well handled. This is the IT side. Putting those together in an innovative way is really important. And then increasing, so sharing, don't like sharing. Somehow can we collaborate to illuminate the battlefield in real time? That's where we're spending our innovation budget. Tom, would you?
Yes, so let me add a couple of things here. So our company and our industry are doing a lot with innovation, working with a number of partners. So Energy Impact Partners is one of our partners in innovation, and we're making investments specifically in the cyber world of new and interesting capabilities that are coming around. But we've got other partners as well. So EPRI within our industry is a great partner for us with innovation. A lot of work being done there. The DOE National Labs. So a lot of work happening under that umbrella. So like the Coyote project, DOE Coyote, which is cybersecurity for operational technology environments, is a lot of work that was done at Southern and several other utilities that sort of turned into something that DOE could make a capability for the broader energy sector. Even organizations like DARPA, so Tom, you mentioned spare tire before. There's a lot of work being done to look at how can we create capability in those really bad days when the electronics don't work or we can't trust them. How can we still manage the grid reliably? And so there's a lot of innovation that's going on in the cyber world or even in the resiliency world within the sector across a lot of partners.
Hey, and let me just add real quick. I know one of your subcommittees at ESCC deals with R&D.
Right.
So we have an innovation mission inside. And when we started that, I thought I was kind of like skeptical, but it's really been valuable.
Do I have time for a final question? I still don't have a clock. Okay, they may not want to answer it, but you walked right into it when you said about not being able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
I hate this question. I hate it on every panel that it always gets asked. But given the two of you have this unique position and perspective of where you are, what is the threat that actually does keep you up at night? What is the one where you think, we don't have an answer for this?
First of all, any question is fair game. And the more important the question, the more it should be aired. So I'm completely happy to do anything there. Mine is this idea of where conflict is going. The tools within cyber technology are getting more plentiful, cheaper, and more powerful. if you just think about where we've come with your goofy little iPhone from where we were 10 years ago, what will be the capability and reach of cyber warfare 10 years from now? And the one that particularly worries me would be quantum computing.
That's mine, yep.
When you completely obviate, on one hand, passwords and security, well, on the other hand, now I'm perfectly protected because I'm in this crazy fractile world, for heaven's sakes. That's the one. It's, you know, I always say that when I try to breed inside a culture of a company is the vision and courage to see around the corners of the future. Boy, I have a hard time seeing what that world is going to look like, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Quantum computing.
Really?
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we are at time. I want to thank you both for joining us.
Great.
Thank
for
you.
giving us your time, and thank you everyone for
Thank you.
listening.
Well done, my friend.
All right.